Hey friends, and welcome back. I have something so exciting to share with you all today. Ever since I was younger and delving into all kinds of amazing, fantastical worlds in books, I have been absolutely obsessed with illustrated maps in fantasy novels. I think we can all agree there's something super magical about opening a book and seeing a full spread of the land that you're reading about right in front of you. And it's really cool to be able to flip back as you're reading, of course, and trace where the characters are going or the cities that they're seeing. And it's something that I have always thought would be super cool to do for my own books, of course. When I published my first 2 novels, I didn't quite have the resources or the time to be able to do a map in the way that I would have liked. So my first novels don't have maps, but it's something I always wished I could do, of course. And I have finally been able to step into learning how to illustrate my own map for my current novel. With Beneath Watercolor Waves, I have had a pretty clear idea in my head for the majority of this story, what a map would look like if I was able to actually make it work this time. So sitting down to actually start the details and lay out the realm of Miridwyth was something that really wasn't as hard as I feared it would be. It's been such a joy to just put everything down on paper and see how it all kind of unfolds in front of me, and I can't wait to share this process with you. Over this past year, I've experimented with a few different types of maps, using different pens, different inks, and papers just to see exactly what kind of details I want for Miridwyth. So for my final version of the map, I actually decided to use my crow quill and dip ink to try to achieve a little bit more of a vintage look with a textured, kind of thinner newsprint paper that I had. So as you can see, this older version that I did is really nice and crisp. I really like the way it turned out. But of course, my biggest goal for the final map was to actually make the kind of map that can go from between 2 pages left and right in the final book once it's printed. So I wanted to make my map bigger, and I wanted to make it a little less crisp so that it looks a little bit more hand-drawn, because within the book itself, my main character, Ren, is actually following a hand-drawn map at one point in the story, so I kind of wanted to harken back to that for the map that I will eventually include into the front of the book. So the nice thing about using the crow quill and ink for the outer edges of the world is that it kind of feathers a tiny bit into the paper I was using, which is a look I wanted because I wanted something that looked a little bit older, a little bit more worn. And then once I moved into doing the details inside the world, I started using some more thinner pens that I have on hand. That way the ink didn't bleed as much, and that way I could achieve the finer details that I wanted for the textures of the terrain and the different cities that I have popping up all over the map. The terrain of Miridwyth is mostly dominated by grasslands, which I like to imagine them be really windswept with beautiful flowers and beautiful sunsets as my travelers are going through the land. Most of my main cities that I feature on the map are flanked by low mountain ranges that are rugged, but they're not impassable. They're kind of like these beautiful peaks kind of off in the distance that roll through the grasslands. And much of Miridwyth is actually full of beautifully lush forests, which kind of just surround a lot of the grasslands and tie everything together. My story itself actually begins mostly in a forest, which is called Idlewood, and it flanks the main city that we start the book in, which is called Pharaoh. Of course, my main character, Ren, is completely unfamiliar with this terrain because she is not from Miridwyth or from this world at all, and she has fallen into this land through a painting of her own creating. So the majority of the story, she is actually trying to really just find herself and find her place in this strange land. And later on in the story, she actually will be traveling across it quite a bit to get to a destination that ends up being very pivotal to the story. Beautiful. My secondary main character, on the other hand, is very familiar with Miridwyth. He grew up in the city of Faroe and actually is very familiar with the surrounding forest of Idlewood. One scene in particular at the beginning of the book, I think, does a pretty good job at setting the scene of the forest. He had grown up in these woods, knew every knoll and hollow, knew every sound as well as he knew himself. The moss-covered ground accepted his footfalls easily, masking the sound of his steps as he made his way deeper in. His ears strained against the familiar sounds of the wood at night, the whisper of creaking trees as they settled, a slight susurration of leaves caressed by the cool breeze. And then he heard it, a faint yet unmistakable hint of a voice. It came from just ahead, somewhere to the right of the path, by the old witch tree by the sound of it. Tiernan adjusted the dagger in his grip and eased into the little clearing. That's just the littlest sneak peek at the story and how it begins. And as the story itself begins to unfold, you'll see a lot more of the world of Miridwyth being explored, with a lot of destinations in mind that end up playing pivotal roles to just what Ren is going through and how Tiernan can be there with her, kind of guiding her and helping her get to where she needs to be. I put a lot of thought into making sure my map held a few of those places that I knew would be pretty big in the story itself. And it was so fun to illustrate the little icons of the cities, but also little landmarks that I knew would be important for Ren in her journey across Miridwyth. Watercolor Waves I Drown is most importantly an emotional journey for my characters. I'm always striving to focus on the inner workings of my characters and just what they're going through as their story unfolds around them. But for this book, I also wanted to make sure to focus on the world that Ren is surrounded by as well, because it really plays a big part into just what she's going through, of course. So it's almost, in a way, like Miridwyth is a character all on its own, because it is welcoming her in as well as pulling her along to something that she doesn't quite know the importance of yet, but is yearning to find just how it is she came to be in this world and how it is that it even pulled her in. I'll share one more small quote with you just to set the scene a little better. What kind of things lived in Miridwyth's forests? Maybe she should have asked herself that question before rashly deciding to find her way back home. But she was here now, and if she turned back, the guard would only have questions she couldn't answer. She tried to ignore the feeling that she wasn't alone. The trees stood like silent sentinels, and the deeper the path led her, the more Ren couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching. Thank you so much for watching and listening as I share little bits of this world that I have created.